Early English Alliterative Poems. By an unknown author. Preface. The following poems are taken from a well-known manuscript in the Cottonian collection, marked Nero A.X., which also contains, in the same handwriting and dialect, a metrical romance, one wherein the adventures of Sir Gawain with the Knight in Green are most ably and interestingly described. The 1. Unfortunately, nothing can be affirmed with any certainty concerning the authorship of these most valuable and interesting compositions. The editor of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight considers that Huchone, a supposed Scotch maker of the 14th century, has the best claims to be recognized as the author, inasmuch as he is specially referred to by Wintoun as the writer of the Great Jest of Arthur and the Ontire of Gawain. 2. I do not think that any certain conclusions are to be drawn from the Scotch historian's assertion. It is well known that more versifiers than one during the 14th century attempted romance composition in the English language, having for their theme the knightly deeds of Arthur or Sir Gawain. These they compiled from French originals, from which they selected the most striking incidents, and those best suited to an Englishman's taste for the marvelous. We are not surprised, then, at finding so many romance poems treating of the exploits of the same hero, and laying claim to be considered as original productions. In Scotland, Huchone's works might no doubt have been regarded as the standard romances of the period, but that they were the only English jests is indeed very doubtful. The early English alliterative romance, entitled The Morte Arthur, published from a manuscript in Lincoln Cathedral by Mr. Halliwell, 3 is considered by Sir F. Madden to be the veritable jest of Arthur composed by Huchone. An examination of this romance does not lead me to the same conclusion, unless Huchone was a Midland man, for the poem is not written in the old Scotch dialect, but seems to have been originally composed in one of the Northumbrian dialects spoken south of the Tweed. 5. 3. 4. 5. The manuscript from which Mr. Halliwell has taken his text is not the original copy, nor even a literal transcript of it. It exhibits certain orthographical and grammatical peculiarities unknown to the Northumbrian dialect which have been introduced by a Midland transcriber, who has here and there taken the liberty to adapt the original text to the dialect of his own locality, probably that one of the North Midland counties, where many of the Northumbrian forms of speech would be intelligible. 6. 6. A comparison of the Arthurian romance with the following poems throws no light whatever upon the authorship of the poems. The dialect of the two works is altogether different, although many of the terms employed are common to both, being well known over the whole of the north of England. The grammatical forms, the best test we can have, in the poems are quite distinct from those in the Morte Arthur, and of course go far to prove that they do not proceed from the pen of the same writer. The editor of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight acknowledges that the poems in the present volume, as now preserved to us in the manuscript, are not in the Scottish dialect, but he says, there is sufficient internal evidence of their being northern. 7. Although the manuscript containing them appears to have been written by a scribe of the Midland counties, which will account for the introduction of forms differing from those used by writers beyond the Tweed. 7. Now, with regard to this subsequent transcription of the poems from the Scotch into a Midland dialect, it cannot be said to be improbable, for we have abundant instances of the multiplication of copies by scribes of different localities, so that we are not surprised at finding the works of some of our popular early English writers appearing in 2 or 3 forms. But, on the other hand, a comparison of the original copy with the adapted transcriptions, or even the reading of a transcribed copy, always shows how the author's productions have suffered by the change. Poetical works, especially those with final rhymes, of course undergo the greatest amount of transformation and depreciation. The changes incident upon the kind of transcription referred to are truly surprising, and most perplexing to those who make the subject of early English dialects a matter of investigation. But in the present poems, the uniformity and consistency of the grammatical forms is so entire, that there is indeed no internal evidence of subsequent transcription into any other dialect than that in which they were originally written. However, the dialect and grammatical peculiarities will be considered hereafter. Again, in the course of transcription into another dialect, any literary merit that the author's copy may have originally possessed would certainly be destroyed. But the poems before us are evidently the work of a man of birth and education, the productions of a true poet, and of one who had acquired a perfect mastery over that form of the English tongue spoken in his own immediate locality during the earlier part of the 14th century. Leaving out of consideration their great philological worth, they possess an intrinsic value of their own as literary compositions, very different from anything to be found in the works of Robert of Gloucester, Manning, and many other early English authors, which are very important as philological records, but in the light of poetical productions, cannot be said to hold a very distinguished place in English literature. The poems in the present volume contain many passages which, as Sir F. Manning truly remarks, will bear comparison with any similar ones in the works of Douglas or Spenser. I conclude, therefore, that these poems were not transcribed from the Scotch dialect into any other, but were written in their own West-Midland speech in which we now have them. Mr. Donaldson, who is now editing for the Early English Text Society the Troy book, translated from Guido di Colana, puts forward a plea for Hutchone as its author, to whom he would also assign the Mort Arthur, edition Perry, and the Pistol of Sweet Susan. 8. But Mr. Donaldson seems to have been misled by the similarity of vocabulary, which is not at all a safe criterion in judging of works written in a Northumbrian, West or East Midland speech. The dialect, I venture to think, is a far safer test. A careful examination of the Troy book compels me to differ in toto from Mr. Donaldson, and instead of assigning the Troy book to a Scotchman, say that it cannot even be claimed, in its present form, by any Northumbrian south of the Tweed. Moreover, it presents no appearance of having been tampered with by one unacquainted with the dialect, though it has perhaps been slightly modernized in the course of transcription. 8. The work is evidently a genuine West Midland production, 9 having most of the peculiarities of vocabulary and inflections that are found in these alliterative poems. 10. I feel greatly inclined to claim this English Troy book as the production of the author of the alliterative poems. 4. Leaving out identical and by no means common expressions, we find the same power of description. 11. And the same tendency to inculcate moral and religious truths on all occasions where an opportunity presents itself. 12. Without dwelling upon this topic, which properly falls to the editor of the Troy book, it may not be out of place to ask the reader to compare the following description of a storm from the Troy book with that selected from the present volume on pages 14 and 18. 9. 10. 11. 12. A tempest on E.C. There a tempest ham toke on E. Torres Heg, a rack and a roid wind rose in Horsaily, a mist and a merkins was mervel to S.E. With a ritound rain ruth to behold, Thonor E.T. 13 full throughly with a thick highly, with a looning light as a low fire, blas E.T. all the broad sea as it bren wold. The flowed with a fell course flow E.T. on heppies, rose upon rocks as any rank a hiles. So woed were the wogs and ye wild youths, all was like to be lost at no London hae the ship I shot firth o ye shire wogs, as quo clim at a cliff, or a clent 14 hill. F dump in the depe as all drown wolde. Was no stitling with steer any no stide ropes, any no sail, at might saru for unsound vider. But all the burns in the boat, as ham best liked, besought unto Saint Tes and to seer gods, page 65. A tempest on E.C. There a tempest ham toke on E. Torres Heg. A rack and a roid wind rose in Horsaily. A mist and a merkins was mervel to S.E. With a ritound rain ruth to behold. Thonor E.T. 13 full throughly with a thick highly. 13. With a looning light as a low fire. Blas E.T. all the broad sea as it bren wold. The flowed with a fell course flow E.T. on heppies. Rose upon rocks as any rank a hiles. So woed were the wogs and ye wild youths. All was like to be lost at no London haid. The ship I shot firth o ye shire wogs. As quo clim at a cliff, or a clent 14 hill. 14. F dump in the depe as all drown wolde. Was no stitling with steer any no stide ropes. Any no sail, at might saru for unsound vider. But all the burns in the boat, as ham best liked. Besought unto Saint Tes and to seer gods, page 65. A storm on the S.E. all the company anklin E.T. care wyen to ship, catch wyen in cables, can white ye up hor anchors, says it VP hor sails in a sad hast. Richeer rapes, wrap it unto sea. Hoke it out of Hoen, all the heap salmon, hey bur at hor bake, blawn to ye depe, sail wyan for the soberly, salmon but a while, not 15 for long fairly to the end. When suddenly the soft air unsoberly rose, the cloudies overcast, clattered a bit, winds full woldly walt up the youths, wex murk as the midnight mists full thick, thunderit in the thester throughly with all, with a lawn chant late lightened the water, and a ropan rain raked fro the hewen. The storm was full stithed with mony stout winds, hit walt up the wild eve pon wan hillis. The folk was so furred, that on fleet were, all dreed for to drown with dryft of the se, and in peril were put all the proud kinges. Page 150. A storm on the se. All the company anklin et care wyan to ship. Catch wyan in cables, can wike up hor anchors. Says it vp hor sails in a sad hast. Riche rapes, rapid unto sea. Hoke it out of Hoen, all the heap salmon. Hey bur at hor bake, blown to ye depe. Sail wyan for the soberly, salmon but a while. Not 15 for long fairly to the end. When suddenly the soft air unsoberly rose. The cloudies overcast, clattered a bit. Winds full woldly walt up the youths. Wex murk as the midnight mists full thick. Thunderit in the thester throughly with all. With a lawn chant late lightened the water. And a ropan rain raked fro the hewen. The storm was full stithed with mony stout winds. Hit walt up the wild eve pon wan hillis. The folk was so furred, that on fleet were. All dreed for to drown with dryft of the se. And in peril were put all the proud kinges. Page 150. The poems in the present volume, 3 in number, seem to have been written for the purpose of enforcing, by line upon line and precept upon precept, resignation to the will of God, purity of life as manifested in thought, word, and deed, obedience to the divine command, and patience under affliction. In the first poem, entitled by me, The Pearl, the author evidently gives expression to his own sorrow for the loss of his infant child, a girl of 2 years old, whom he describes as a. The first poem. Pearl pleasant to prince's pay. Pearl pleasant to prince's pleasure. To clamly cloths in gold so clear. Most neatly set in gold so clear. Of her death he says, Alas! I lest hyr in on Urbera. Alas! I lost her in an arbor. Gress to ground hit fro me yacht. Through grass to ground it from me got. The writer then represents himself as visiting his child's grave, or arbor, in the high season of August, and giving way to his grief. He falls asleep, and in a dream is carried toward a forest, where he saw rich rocks gleaming gloriously, hillsides decked with crystal cliffs, and trees the leaves of which were as burnished silver. The gravel under his feet was precious pearls of Orient, and birds of flaming hues flew about in company, whose notes were far sweeter than those of the cytole or guitar. The dreamer arrives at the bank of a stream, which flows over stones shining like stars in the welkin on a winter's night, and pebbles of emeralds, sapphires, or other precious gems, so at all the low lay mead of Lyt, that all the deep gleamed of light. So dear what hid a dubment, so dear was its adornment. Following the course of the stream, he perceives on the opposite side a crystal cliff, from which was reflected many a royal ray. At y foot of Arcy de font. At the foot thereof there sat a child. A maiden of Mensk full debonair. A maiden of honor full debonair. Blisnan whyt what hyr blount. Glistening white was her robe. I knew hyrwl, I hadeson hyr. I knew her well, I had seen her before. At glistening gold at Mancon shore. As shining gold that man did purify. So shone at Skene and Bender shore. So shone that sheen, bright one, on the opposite shore. On Lunha I looked to hyr. Long I looked to her there. Langer I knew hyr more and more. The longer I knew her, more and more. The maiden rises, and proceeding along the bank of the stream, approaches him. He tells her that he has done nothing but mourn for the loss of his pearl, and has been indeed a joyless jeweler. However, now that he has found his pearl, he declares that he is no longer sorrowful, but would be a joyful jeweler, were he allowed to cross the stream. The maiden blames her father for his rash speech, tells him that his pearl is not lost, and that he cannot pass the stream till after death. The dreamer is in great grief. He does not, he says, care what may happen if he is again to lose his pearl. The maiden advises him to bear his loss patiently, and to abide God's doom. She describes to him her blissful state in heaven, where she reigns as a queen. She explains to him that Mary is the Empress of heaven, and all others kings and queens. The parable of the laborers in the vineyard 15 is then rehearsed at length, to prove that innocents are admitted to the same privileges as are enjoyed by those who have lived longer upon the earth. The maiden then speaks to her father of Christ and his 140,000 brides, and describes their blissful state. She points out to him the heavenly Jerusalem, which was all of bright burnished gold, gleaming like glass. Then the dreamer beholds a procession of virgins going to salute the Lamb, among whom he perceives his little queen. On attempting to cross the stream to follow her, he is aroused from his dream, laments his rash curiosity in seeking to know so much of God's mysteries, and declares that man ever desires more happiness than he has any right to expect. 15. The second poem, entitled Cleanness, is a collection of biblical stories, in which the writer endeavors to enforce purity of life, by showing how greatly God is displeased at every kind of impurity, and how sudden and severe is the punishment which falls upon the sinner for every violation of the divine law. Second poem. After commending cleanness and its fair forms, the author relates I. The parable of the marriage feast, 2. The fall of the angels, 3. The wickedness of the antediluvian world. He what famed for Ariat fet lewd best. He was famous as free that fight loved best. And I bijust in Baal best what Halden. And ever the biggest in sin the best was held. 4. The destruction of mankind by the flood. When all were safely stowed in the ark. Then soon calm seen day, when Sammead were Allah. Then soon came the seventh day when assembled were all. And Allah wond in which she wild and tame. And all abode in the ark, hutch, the wild and the tame. And Bolnedi Abaim and Bankan rise. Then swelled the abyss and banks did rise. Waltz out vch wallhewed, in full woad stream. Burst out each wellhead in full wild streams. What no brim at abad brassen by you. There was no brim, stream, that abode unburst by then. Mukal laonda log to lift reared. The much, great, flowing deep, lock to the loft sky reared. Moni clustered cloud clef alla in clout. Many a clustering cloud cleft all in clout's pieces. To rent vch a rain rift, and rush to Ivry. Rent was each a rain rift, and rush to the earth. Van Neuer in 40 day, and any flood rises. Failed never in 40 days, and then the flood rises. Ouya walt visha wod and wide felda. Overflows each wood and the wide fields. Water will dry wax, won't at stride. Water wildly ever waxed, abodes that destroyed. Hurled into vch house, hent at our dowled. Hurled into each house, seized those that there dwelt. Fyresti fongti flwykiala at flemyt. First took to flight all that flee might. Vush bird with her barney byggyngyla. Each bride, woman, with her bairn their abode they leave. And bowed thy bank a brentist hit wern. And hied to the high bank where highest it were. And headily to high hill a led on fast. And hastily to the high hills they rushed on fast. Bought out what nettle her note, for neuer cow stynty. But all was needless their device, for never could stop. Ro rain and ryg and rake and wall. The rough raining shower and the rushing waves. Vch boom what birdful to bank eggy. Each bottom valley was brimful to the bank's edges. And visha dales so depe at dammed eddy brink. And each dale so deep that dammed at the brinks. The ark is described as heaved on high with hurling streams. Kest to kivki cloud full near. Cast to kingdoms uncouth the clouds full near. Hit waltered on the wild flood, went as hit list. It tossed on the wild flood, when does it list? Drof pani depe dam, in donger hit semed. It drove upon the deep dam, in danger it seemed. Without an mast, or Mike, or Mary Balline. Without mast, or Mike, or Mary Balline. Mike. Cable, or capstan to clip to her anchor. Cable or capstan to clip to their anchors. Hurrick, or handhelm hasped on rower. Or handhelm hooked on rudder. Or any swen sail to sesh after howen. Or any swinging sail to seek after haven. But float for the with the flyt of fell wind. But floated forth with the force of the fell winds. Weatherward so water waft, hit rebound. Whitherward so, as, the water waft, it rebounded. Oft hit rolled on round and reared on endy. Oft it rolled around and reared on end. And why if our Lord had been her load man hem had lumpen hard. Had our Lord not been there, pilot, leader hardship had befallen them. V. The visit of 3 angels to Abraham. 6. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, including a description of the Dead Sea, the Tarn, lake of traitors. 7. The invasion of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, and the captivity of Judah. The following is a paraphrase of the 4th and 5th verses in the 25th chapter of the 2nd book of Kings. 17. 17. Nekyng of Ekyth a counsel Hym takes. Then the king of the kingdom a counsel him takes. Wyth the best of his burns, a blench for to make. With the best of his men a device for to make. I stole out on a still nyt or any stone rised. They stole out on a still night ere any sound arose. And hard hurls or yast or enemies hit whist. And hard hurled through the host, ere enemies it whist. Butter I at wop any moe walk with it. But ere they could escape the watch without. High skelp would he ask re skews and vendor. High scattered was the cry, the skies thereunder. Loud alarm upon land lulted was en. Loud alarm upon land sounded was then. Rish, rid of her rest, ran to hear weeds. Rich men, roused from their rest, ran to their weeds. Hard hats I hent and on Orlepes. Kettle hats they seized, and on horse leap. Clare clarion crack cried on loft. Clear clarions crack cried aloft. By at what all on a heap hurlin sway. By that time was all on a heap, hurling fast. Foland at o'er float, and fond hem billu. Following that other fleet, host, and found them soon. O your talk hem, as tyd, told hem of saw less. As tyd, overtook them in a trice, tilted them off saddles. Till Vish prince had his peer put to ground. Till each prince had his peer put to the ground. And what Ekyng Catwyth called the princes. And there was the king caught with crafty princes. And all the highest Gentile fariasted on Jericho plains. And all his nobles vanquished on Jericho's plains. 8. Belshazzar's impious feast, and the handwriting upon the wall. In e palais principal upon e plain wall. In the palace principal upon the plain wall. In contrary of e candlestick at clearest it skined. Opposite to the candlestick that clearest there shone. Are appeared a palm, with pointel in fingers. There appeared a palm with a pointel in its fingers. At what gry and gret, and grymly he writes. That was grisly and great, and grimly it writes. None or for me but a fust failing ewryst. None other form but a fist failing the wrist. Paired on e parget, portrayed lettre. Paired on the plaister, portrayed letters. When that bold Balter blushed at Nui. When that bold Belshazzar looked to that fist. Such a descend dread dush to his hurt. Such a dazzling dread dash to his heart. At all failed his face and failed the share. That all paled his face and failed the cheer. Ye strong stroke of Easton strain at his eyelids. The strong stroke of the blows strained his joints. His knees catch to close and clutches his hams. His knees catch to close, and he clutches his hams. And he with platting his palms displays his lairs. And he with striking his palms displays his fears. And roamies as a rat are white at roar for dread. And howls as a frightened hound that roars for dread. I beholden e han till hit hate el growen. ever beholding the hand till it had all graven, and rasped on ero wo runish saw, and rasped on the rough wall uncouth saw's words. 9. The story of Nebuchadnezzar's pride and its punishment, and the interpretation of the handwriting by Daniel. X. The invasion of Babylon by the Medes. Balter in his bed what betend to D. Belshazzar in his bed was beaten to death. At both his blood and his brain blend on e clothes. That both his blood and his brains blended on the clothes. Ekyng in his court and what cat by Heles. The king in his curtain was caught by the heels. Ferried out by fate and foul despised. Ferried out by the feet and foully despised. At what so doughty at day and drank of vessel. He that was so doughty that day and drank of the vessels. Now is a dog also dear at in a dych liggies. Now is as dear, valuable, as a dog that in a ditch lies. The third poem, entitled Patience, is a paraphrase of the book of Jonah. The writer prefaces it with a few remarks of his own in order to show that patience is a noble point though it displease oft. Third poem. The following extract contains a description of the sea storm which overtook Jonah. Anon out of nor-est noise bygines. Anon out of the northeast the noise begins. When bow breeze con blove pon bielo waters. Bow breeze. When both breezes did blow upon blue waters. Row racks arose with reddening and vendor. Rough clouds there arose with lightning thereunder. E sea sobbed full sore, gret selly to hear. The sea sobbed full sore, great marvel to hear. E winds on one water so rastle togder. The winds on the wan waters so wrestled together. At vaves full woed waltered so high. That the waves full wild rolled so high. And bush to abime at breed fishes. And again bent to the abyss that bred fishes. Durst nowhere for row arrest at bahem. Durst it nowhere for roughness rest at the bottom. When breath and brack and boat metten. When the breeze and the brook and the boat met. Hit what a isles gyn at Iona's what in. It was a joyless engine that Jonah was in. For hit relled on round bonny row yes. For it reeled around upon the rough waves. Burbiar to hit baft at brast all her gear. The bore wave bare to it a baft that burst all her gear. And hurled on a heapy helm and stern. Then hurled on a heap the helm and the stern. First to mert moni rop and mast after. To mert. First marred asterisk many a rope and the mast after. Marred. Sails sweet on sea, and sup byhoud. The sails swung on the sea, then sup behoved. Coge of cold water, and then cry rises. The boat of the cold water, and then the cry rises. Et corwin cordis and cast elorut. Yet cut they the cords and cast all thereout. Moni ladda are forth leapt to low and to cast. Many a lad therefore leapt to lave and to cast. Scopen out scale water, at fain scape wolde. To scoop out the scathful water that fain escape would. For be man's load noyer so lure, life is sweet. For be man's lot never so bad, the life is sweet. The writer, in concluding the story of Jonah, exhorts his readers to be patient in pain and in joy. For he had is to rakel to rinden his clo. Motf sit with more vien sound to so hem togder. For he that is too rash to rend his clothes must afterwards sit with more unsound, worse ones, to sew them together. This brief outline of the poems, together with the short extracts from them, will, it is hoped, give the reader stomach to digest the whole. It is true that they contain many uncouth terms, but this will be their highest merit with the student of language, as is shown by Dr. Guest's testimony that they are, for several reasons, curious, and especially so to the philologist. 22. To those readers who do not appreciate the importance of such a very large addition to the vocabulary of our early language as is made by these treatises, let Sir Frederick Madden's opinion of their literary merit suffice. That distinguished editor says of the author's poetical talent, the pieces contained in the MS afford unquestionable proofs, and the description of the change of the seasons, the bitter aspect of winter, the tempest which preceded the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the sea storm occasioned by the wickedness of Jonas, are equal to any similar passages in Douglas or Spenser. 23. Moreover, as to the hardness of the language, inasmuch as the subject matter of the poem will be familiar to all who may take up the present volume, the difficulty on the word point will not be such as to deter the reader from understanding and appreciating the production of an Old English poet, who, though his very name, unfortunately, has yet to be discovered, may claim to stand in the foremost rank of England's early bards. Brief outline. 22. 23. The editor of the present volume has endeavored to do justice to his author by giving the text, with some few exceptions, as it stands in the manuscript. 24. The contractions of the scribe have been expanded and printed in italics, a plan which he hopes to see adopted in every future edition of an early English author. 24. The has been compiled not only for the benefit of the reader, but for the convenience of those who are studying the older forms of our language, and who know how valuable a mere index of words and references sometimes proves. In conclusion, I take the present opportunity of acknowledging the kind assistance of Sir Frederick Madden and E.A. Bond, Esq., of the British Museum, who, on every occasion, were most ready to render me any help in deciphering the manuscript, in parts almost illegible, from which the poems in the present volume are printed. Remarks upon the dialect and grammar. Remarks upon the dialect and grammar. Higden, writing about the year AD 1350, affirms, distinctly, the existence of three different forms of speech or dialects, namely, Southern, Midland, and Northern. 25. Or, as they are sometimes designated, West Saxon, Mercian, and Northumbrian. Garnett objects to Higden's classification, and considers it certain that there were in Higden's time, and probably long before, 5 distinctly marked forms, which may be classed as follows: 1. Southern or Standard English, which in the 14th century was perhaps best spoken in Kent and Surrey by the body of the inhabitants. 2. Western English, of which traces may be found from Hampshire to Devonshire, and northward as far as the Avon. 3. Mercian, vestiges of which appear in Shropshire, Staffordshire, and South and West Derbyshire, becoming distinctly marked in Cheshire, and still more so in South Lancashire. 4. Anglian, of which there are 3 subdivisions: the East Anglian of Norfolk and Suffolk, the Middle Anglian of Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire and East Derbyshire, and the North Anglian of the West Riding of Yorkshire, spoken most purely in the central part of the mountainous district of Craven. 5. Northumbrian, spoken throughout the lowlands of Scotland, Northumberland, Durham, and nearly the whole of Yorkshire. AD 25. Garnett's division is based upon peculiarities of pronunciation, which will be found well marked in the modern provincial dialects, and not upon any essential differences of inflection that are to be found in our early English manuscripts. 26. 26. The distinction between Southern and Western English was not at all required, as the Kentish Ironbite of Inwit, AD 1340, exhibits most of the peculiarities that mark the chronicles of Robert of Gloucester, Cottonian MS. Calig. A. 11. As a Southern, or West Saxon, production. The Anglian of Norfolk, Lincolnshire, and Nottinghamshire may be referred to one group with the Mercian of Lancashire, as varieties of the Midland dialect. AD. A careful examination of our early literature leads us to adopt Higden's classification as not only a convenient but a correct one. There is, perhaps, no better test for distinguishing these dialects from one another than the verbal inflections of the plural number in the present tense, indicative mood. To state this test in the briefest manner, we may say that the Southern dialect employs eth, the Midland n, and the Northumbrian es as the inflection for all persons of the plural present indicative. 27. Indicative. 27. 27. Southern. Midland. Northern. First pers. Hopeth. Hopen. Hopies. We hope. Second. Hopeth. Hopen. Hopies. Ye hope. Third. Hopeth. Hopen. Hopies. They hope. It is the constant and systematic employment of these inflections, and not their occasional use, that must be taken as the criterion of dialectical varieties. In a pure specimen of the Southern dialect, we never find the Northumbrian es. We do occasionally meet with the Midland N, but only in those works written in localities where, from their geographical position, southern and midland forms would be intelligible. 28. We might look in vain for the southern plural eth in a pure Northumbrian production, but might be more successful in finding the midland n in the third person plural, as they arn, for they are, or they're. 28. In a work composed in Lincolnshire, Nottinghamshire, or Lancashire, we should be sure to find the occasional use of the Northumbrian plural yes. 29. 29. The inflections of the verb in the singular are of value in enabling us to discriminate between the several varieties of the Midland dialect. 30. The southern and midland idioms, with the exception of the West Midland of Lancashire, Cheshire, etc., conjugated the verb in the singular present indicative, as follows. 30. Follows. First pers. Hope. I hope. Second. Hopest. Thou hopest. Third. Hopeth. He hopes. The West Midland corresponding to Garnett's Mercian, instead of est and eth employs the inflections that are so common in the so-called Northumbrian documents of the 9th and 10th centuries. First pers. Hope. I hope. Second. Hopies. Thou hopest. Third. Hopies. He hopes. The Northumbrian dialect takes es in all three persons, but mostly drops it in the first person. The peasantry of Cheshire and Lancashire still preserve the verbal inflections which prevailed in the 14th century, and conjugate their verbs in the present indicative according to the following model. Model. Singular. Plural. First pers. Hope. Hopen. Second. Hopes. Hopen. Third. Hopes. Hopen. Inasmuch as the poems in the present volume exhibit the systematic use of these forms, we cannot but believe that they were originally composed in one of those counties where these verbal inflections were well known and extensively used. We have to choose between several localities, but if we assign the poems to Lancashire, we are enabled to account for the large number of Norse terms employed. It is true that the ancient examples of the Lancashire dialect contained in Mr. Robson's metrical romances, 31 The Boke of Courtesy, 32 and Libercure Cocorum, 33 present us with much broader forms, as us for es in the plural number and possessive case of nouns, un for and in the plural present indicative mood, in passive participles of irregular, or strong, verbs, udet. For ed in the past tense and passive participle of regular, or weak, verbs, and the pronominal forms hor, their, ham, them, for her and him. 34. 31. 32. 33. 34. These forms are evidence of a broad pronunciation which, at the present time, is said to be a characteristic of the northwestern division of Lancashire, but I think that there is good evidence for asserting that this strong provincialism was not confined, formerly, to the West Midland dialect, much less to a division of any particular county. We find traces of it in Audeley's poems, Shropshire, the Romance of William and the Werewolf, 35, and even in the Wycliffite version of the Scriptures. 35. Formerly, being influenced by these broad forms, I was led to select Cheshire or Staffordshire as the probable locality where the poems were written, but I do not, now, think that either of these counties ever employed a vocabulary containing so many Norse terms as are to be found in the Lancashire dialect. But although we may not be able to fix, with certainty, upon any one county in particular, the fact of the present poems being composed in the West Midland dialect cannot be denied. Much may be said in favor of their Lancashire origin, and there are one or two points of resemblance between our poems, the Lancashire romances, and Libercure Cocorum, that deserve especial notice. In Sir Amadeus 3668. 9. There occurs the curious form mitis equals mites equals mitest. 37. As it appears only once throughout the romances, we might conclude that it is an error of the scribe for mitest, but when we find in the poems before us not only mite equals mites, mitest, but wold equals woldes, wouldst, could equals couthes, couldst, dipt, diptus, travailed, travelst, etc., we are bound to consider mitis as a genuine form. 38. In no other early English works of the 14th century have I been able to find this peculiarity. It is very common in the Wohung of your Loward, Ziath Sent. Coe Homilies, page 51. The Northumbrian dialect at this period rejected the inflection in the second person preterite singular, of regular verbs, 39, and in our poems we find the s often dropped, so that we get two conjugations, which may be called the inflected and the uninflected form. 36, 37, 38, 39. Inflected, uninflected. First pers. Hopped, hoped. I hoped. Second. Hoped yes. Hoped. Thou hopedest. Third. Hopped. Hoped. He hoped. Originally the inflected form may have prevailed over the whole of the north of England, but have gradually become confined to the West-Midland dialect. 2. The next point of resemblance is the use of the verb shin or shun equals shall. It is still preserved in the modern dialect of Lancashire in combination with the adverb not, as shall not 40 equals shall not. The following examples will serve to illustrate the use of this curious form. Shin. Shun. 40. Form. I shin na sown, is no bount and burn like Balter use. 41b, L. 1435. And os at seme arn and sweet schy and se his face. 42, Ibid L. 1810. Bicokis and pertrices perboiled schy and b. 43, Libercure Cocorum, page 29. For bene best at schy and b rost. 44, Ibid page 34. All shun be drawn, seer at o side. 45, Ibid p. and 35. Sesh furlies schy and fall. 46, Robson's Met. Ram. Page 12 L. 4. I shin na sown. Is no bount and burn like Balter use. 41b, L. 1435. 41. And os at seme arn and sweet schy and se his face. 42, Ibid L. 1810. 42. Bicokis and pertrices perboiled schy and b. 43, Libercure Cocorum, page 29. 43. For bene best at schy and b rost. 44, Ibid page 34. 44. All shun be drawn, seer at o side. 45, Ibid p. and 35. 45. Sesh furlies schy and fall. 46, Robson's Met. Ram. Page 12 L. 4. 46. 3. Nothing is more common in the present poems than the use of hit as a genitive equals its, which is also found in the Lancashire romances. For e dirk ddc hit is demied evermore, for hit deed of d durin eret. 47, Patience, L. 1021. And, as hit is coursed of kinda and hit custe ls, e clay at clenges are by arn courses strong. 48, Ibid L. 1033. For I will speak with the spreet, and of hit wo will I weet, gif that I may hit Bale's bet. 49, Robson's Met. Romances, page 5, LL 3-4. For e dirk ddc hit is demied evermore. For hit deed of d durin eret. 47, Patience, L. 1021. 47. And, as hit is coursed of kinda and hit custe ls. E clay at clenges are by arn courses strong. 48, Ibid L. 1033. 48. For I will speak with the spreet, and of hit wo will I weet, gif that I may hit Bale's bet. 49, Robson's Met. Romances, page 5, LL 3-4. 49. The present dialect of Lancashire still retains the uninflected genitive. So I gie up be strike o day, on seat yut, on went o grieth tilly welly cum within 2 mile off tone, when os the dulla would height, o tit were standing ot an ale haws dur, on me cove, the dulla bore yut at een for me, took th tit for it mother, on would seek her. 50, Tummas and Neary. 50. Thus much for the dialectical peculiarities of our author. The scanty material at our disposal must be a sufficient excuse for the very meager outline which is here presented to the reader. As our materials increase, The whole question of early English dialects will no doubt receive that attention from English philologists which the subject really demands, and editors of Old English works will then be enabled to speak with greater confidence as to the language and peculiarities of their authors. Something might surely be done to help the student by a proper classification of our manuscripts both as to date and place of composition. We are sadly in want of unadulterated specimens of the Northumbrian and East Midland idioms during the 12th and 13th centuries. There must surely be some records of these dialects in our university libraries which would well repay editing. 51. Grammatical details. Grammatical details. Nouns. 1. Number. The plurals generally end in es. Yen, eyes, trumpet, trumpets are the only plurals in n that occur in the poems. In Robson's metrical romances we find felon, fells, hills, dellen, dells, and Aaron, eggs, in Liber cur cocorum. The plurals of brother, child, cow, doter, daughter, are brether, childer, cui, and deter. 2. Gender. The names of inanimate things are in the neuter gender, as in modern English. The exceptions are deep, femme, glans, femme, and wind, masculine. 3. Case. The genitive singular, masculine and femme, ends in es, but occasionally the inflection is dropped, as Balterthus, the virtues of Belshazzar. 52. If Hand myt, hand work, Helen wom, are not compounds, we have instances of the final en, which formed the genitive case of feminine nouns in the Southern English of the 14th century. 52. In the phrases Bessenblad, blood of beasts, Blankenbach, back of horses, Chwildryn Fader, father of children, Nakerin noise, noise of nakers, we have a trace of the genitive plural asena. 2. Adjectives. 2. 1. Number. The final as a sign of the plural, is very frequently dropped. Pover, poor, stern, strong, make the plurals poverin and sternin. In the phrase, O sight so quike. 53. Those sights so living, the equals es is a mark of the plural, very common in Southern writers of the 14th century, and employed as a plural inflection of the adjective until a very late period in our literature. 53. The article exhibits the following forms: singular, plural, mask, fem, the, though. 54. Though. This forms the plural thys and thes, these. That is always used as a demonstrative, and never as the neuter of the article. Its plural is thas, those. 55. The older form, theos equals these, shows that the e is not a sign of the plural, as many English grammarians have asserted. 55. 2. Degrees of comparison. The comparative degree ends in er, and the superlative in est. Adjectives and adverbs terminating in the syllable lich form the comparative in locer and the superlative in locust, as positive ugly che equals ugly, comp ug locer, supral. Ug locust. The long vowel of the positive is often shortened in the comp and supral, as in the modern English late, latter, last. Positive. Comparative. Superlative. Braid, broad. Bradder. Braddest. Dear, dear. Darer. Durst. Like, leakier. Leakiest. Sweet, sweet. Sweater. Sweatest. Wake, weak. Whacker. Wackest. Woad, mad. Water. Waddest. The following irregular forms are occasionally met with: positive, comparative, superlative, fair, far, foray, fair, forayest, he, high, her, heast, hest, ni, nigh, near, ne'er, nest, nest, ser, sore, sar, sarest, for me, first, for mast, Mikel, great, mo, most, Ivel, ill, bad, where's, were, worst. Numerals. Twin and three occur for 2 and 3. The ordinal numbers are first, the for me. Second, that other tother. Thryd. Fewer. 5. Sext. Savine. 8. Nent. Teen tie. The Northumbrian numerals corresponding to Savine, 8, Nent, teen, are 7, attend, neghend, tend. The southern forms end in the, as Savine, ideo, nigh, tio, tie. 3. Pronouns. 3. In the following poems we find the pronoun ho, she, still keeping its ground against the Northumbrian sco. 56. Ho is identical with the modern Lancashire who, or ha as it is sometimes written, which in some parts of England has nearly the same pronunciation as the accusative her. 56. The Northumbrian they, has displaced the older Midland he, corresponding to the southern pronoun high. Hores and theirs, occasionally occur for here. 57. The genitives in es, due no doubt to Scandinavian influence, are very common in Northumbrian writers of the 14th century, but are never found in any southern work of the same period. 57. Hid is frequently employed as an indefinite pronoun of all genders, and is plural as well as singular. It is, as has been previously shown, uninflected in the genitive or possessive case. Me in southern writers is used as an indefinite pronoun of the third person, and represents our one, but in the present poems it is of all persons, and seems to be placed in apposition with the subject of the sentence corresponding to our use of myself, thyself, himself, etc. as 58, 59, 60. Sturzenbecker. Some notes on the leading grammatical characteristics of the principal early English dialects, Copenhagen, 1868, thinks that I have been led astray with regard to this use of me, which he says is nothing more than the dativus ethicus. The me in these examples may be merely an expletive, having arisen out of the general use of the dative ethicus, but the context does not satisfy me that it has the force of a dative. Dr. Guest, Proceedings of Philologue. SOC, Volume 1, pages 151 to 153, 1842 to 1844, has discussed this construction at some length, and he carefully distinguishes the dative of the first person from the indeterminate, or indefinite, pronoun me equals fr1. He says that in Old Frisian the indefinite pronoun has two forms, min and me, the latter of which seems to be always used as a suffix to the verb, as mom, one may, som, one should, etc. The same construction was occasionally used in our own language, and it no doubt gave rise to those curious idioms which are noticed by Pegg in his Anecdotes of the M. Lang, page 217. This writer, whose evidence to a fact we may avail ourselves of, whatever we think of his criticism or his scholarship, quotes the following as forms of speech then prevalent among the Londoners. And so says me I, well what does me I, so says me she, then away goes me he, what does me they? Here it is obvious that me is the indeterminate pronoun, and represents the subject, while the personal pronoun is put in apposition to it, so that says me I is equivalent to one says that is I. 61. These idioms are not unknown to our literature. 61. 1. But as he was by diverse principal young gentlemen, to his no small glory, lifted up on horseback, comes me a page of Amphialus, etc. Pember. Arcad. B. 3. Other idioms, which have generally been confounded with those last mentioned, have the indeterminate pronoun preceded by a nominative absolute. 2. I, having been acquainted with the smell before, knew it was crab, and goes me to the fellow, who whips the dogs, etc. 2. Gent. Of Verona, 4. 4. 3. He thrusts me himself into the company of 3 or 4 gentlemanlike dogs under the Duke's table. IBCB, Johns. Ev. Men in his humor 3. 1. Johnson considers the me in examples 2 and 3 to be the oblique case of the first person, and treats it as a ludicrous expletive. It is difficult to say how he would have parsed example 2 on such a hypothesis. With these instances of the use of me, indefinite or reflexive, the reader may compare the following. 1. Such a touche in that tide, he tate, gowan, hym and gids me, Sir Gallerun, even grovelanges on ground. The enters of Arthur at the Tarnawadalin, page 22. 2. There at the door he, the fox, cast me down highspack. Spencer's Shep. Cal Edition Morris, page 460, L. 243. CP Cut Me, I, Hen. 4, Act 4. SC4, Steps Me, IB Act 4, SC3, Comes Me, Runs Me, IB Act 3, SC1. 3. Juno enraged and fretting thus. Runs me unto one Aeolus. Virgil Travesty, 1664. The indefinite me equals 1 is not uncommon in Elizabethan writers. Cf. Touch me his hat, touch me here with a pint of sack, etc. And stop me his dice, you are a villain. Lodge's Wits Missouri. The following table exhibits the declension of the personal and relative pronouns. Pronouns: nam, I, thou, he, ho, hit, gen, my myn, thy thyn, his, here her, hit, dat, me, the, him, here her, hit, acc, me, the, him, here her, hit, nam, we, they, hit, gen, our, ya your, her here hor, hit, dat, vus equals use, yao you, hem ham, hit, acc, vus equals use, yao you, hem ham, hit, nam, who quo, gen, whose quos, dat, whom wham, quam, acc, whom wham, quam. 4. Verbs. 4. Infinitive mood. The N of the infinitive is frequently dropped, without even a final E to mark its omission. Infinitives in Y, as Louis, love, shoni, shun, spotty, spot, defile, stiri, stir, oney, dwell, occasionally occur, and probably owe their appearance to the author's acquaintance with Southern literature. 62. 62. Indicative mood. The final E often disappears in the first and third persons of the preterite tense, as I loved, he loved, instead of I loved, he loved. The N in the plural of the present and preterite tenses is frequently dropped. The PL present in E occasionally occurs. Imperative mood. The imperative plural ends in es, e, and not in eth as in the Southern and ordinary Midland dialects. Participles. The active or imperfect participle ends in andy 63 and never in ing. 63. The participle passive or perfect of regular verbs terminates in ed, of irregular verbs in n. Occasionally we find the n disappearing, as bigany, fundy, runny, wani, where perhaps it is represented by the final e. The prefix I or y, asg, occurs twice only in the poems, in I chose, chosen, and I Brad extended. But while common enough in the Southern and Midland dialects, it seems to be wholly unknown to the Northumbrian speech. The verb in the West-Midland dialect is conjugated according to the following model. Model. I. Conjugation of regular verbs. Indicative mood. Present tense. Indicative mood. Singular. Plural. I hope. We hopen. Thou hopes. Ye hopen. He hopes. They hopen. I hopped 64 hoped. 64. We hoped en. Thou hopes hoped. Ye hoped en. He hopped 64 hoped. 64. They hoped en. Imperative mood. Imperative mood. Hope thou. Hopesy. Participles. Participles. Imperfect or active. Perfect or passive. 2. Conjugation of irregular verbs. Indicative mood. Present tense. Indicative mood. Singular. I curve. Ren. Smite. Stand. Thou curves. Ren. Smites. Stands. He curves. Ren. Smites. Stands. Plural. We curven. Rennen. Smiten. Standen. E. They. Singular. I carve. Ran. Smot. Stod. Thou carve. Ran. Smote. Stowed. He carve. ran, smot, stod. Very frequently the E in the second person is dropped, 65 as in the Northumbrian dialect, but we never meet with such forms as carves, equals carvedest, rans, equals ranst, smotes, equals smotest, etc. 65. Plural. We corvin, runnin, smiten, standen. E. They. Passive participles. Passive participles. Corvin, runnin, smiten, standen. The Northumbrian dialect does not preserve any separate form for the preterite plural, and this distinction is not always observed in the present poems. Table of verbs. A. Simple order. A. Simple order. Present. Preterite. Passive participle. Class I. Hate. Hated. Hated. Class II. A. Bead offer. Bed. Bed. Dipe dip. Dipped. Dypt. Kithe show. Kidda. Kid. Lenda. Lenda. Lent. Ren. Ren. Rent. Sen. Sen. Sent. Be. Clothe. Clad. Clad. Deli deal. Dalt. Dalt. Lead. Ladda. Lad. Leave. Laughed. Laughed. Read advise. Rad. Rad. Spreed spread. Sprad. Sprad. Swelt die. Swalt. Sweat sweat. Swat. Threat threaten. Thrat. Thrat. Class 3. Bye bye. Boat. Bot. Bringe. Broat. Brought. Cash catch. Kate. Cat. Latch seize. Late. Lat. Reachy wreck. Wrote. Reachy reach. Rate. Sell. Sold. Sold. Warche work. Wrote. Rot. Be. Complex order. Be. Complex order. Present. Preterite. Passive participle. Class I. Bear bear. Br. Born. Bet beat. Bet. Beten. Break break. Breck. Broken. Cheese choose. Cheese chas. Chosen. Cleave cleave. Clef. Cloven. Eat eat. Et for et. Eaten. For eat forget. For it. Fortin. Freeze freeze. Freeze. Frozen. Gife give. Jeff. Given Jevon. Heave heave. Heg. Hoven. Liga lie. Lee. Layin lean. Leppy leap. Lep. Lopen. Nemi nemi take. Nemi nemi. Take. Nem nam. Nomen. Skier shear. Shures. Shorn. Sleep sleep. Slep. Slepen. Speak speak. Spec. Spoken. Steal steal. Stel. Stolen. Swear swear. Swear. Sworen. Weep weep. WP. Wopen. Reek avenge. Wreck. Roken. Class 2. Fall. Fell. Fallen. Fange take. Foam. Fangen. Grow. Grew. Growen. Hang hung. Hang. Hangin hangen. No na. New. Nawen knowen. Shape make. Skep. Shapen. Walk. Welk. Walkin. Was che. Wesh. Waschen. Class 3. Draw dre. Dro. Drawin. Fair go. 4. Farrin. Lay laugh. Low. Lane. Stand ston. Stod. Standin. Slay. Slow slew. Slain. Take. Talk. Tame tone. Wake. Walk. Waken. Present. Preterite. Passive participle. Class I. Begin. Begin. begonnen, bygonnen. Breast, brass, bors, brussen, bursen. Climb, clam, clomb. Clumben. Drink, dronk, drank. Drunken, drunken. Fine, fand, fon. Fonden. Fight, fat, fet. Photon. Help, help. Holpen. Curve, cut. Carf. Corvin. Melt. Malt. Molten. Ren, run. Ran. Runnin'. Ring. Roam. Rungen, rongen. Singe. Song sang. Sungen. Steek. Stack. Stoken. Stirve, die. Starf. Storven. Warp, throw. Warp. Warpen. Win. Wan, one. Onein. Elda, yield. Ald. Olden. Class 2. Bide, abide. Bod. Biden. Bite. Bot. Biten. Drive. Droff. Driven. Fine, cease. Fawn. Glide. Glod. Gliden. Ride. Rod. Ridden. Rise. Rose. Risen. Shine. Shone. Slide. Slod. Sliden. Smite. Smot. Smiten. Try and go. Tron. Class 3. Fly. Flee, fleg, flaw. Flowen. See. Say, sy. Seen. Sti. Saint. Can. Pret. Kutha. Dare. Dorst. May. Might. Mot. Most. Oeo. Oat. Shall. Scold, shoot. Thar. Third. Wote. Whist. Will. Wolde. Shall, in the second person singular is shall or shalt. So, too, we occasionally find will for wilt. The present plural of shall is shul, shullen, or schyn. The verb to be is thus conjugated. Indicative mood. Indicative mood. Singular. I am. I was what? Thou art. Thou was what? He is best bet. He was what? Plural. We are nar ar. We were. E are nar ar. E were. They are nar ar. They were. The verbs be, have, will, have negative forms, as nam equals are not, nar equals are not, nas equals was not, naf equals have not, nade equals had not, and while equals will not. The following contractions are occasionally met with: bos equals behoves, byhoud equals behoved, ha equals have, ma equals make, man equals make, pl, mat, mas equals makes, ta equals take, tat equals tas equals takes, tain, tone equals taken. The adverbs. The Norse forms heathen, kathen, whethen, 66 and then seem to have been known to the West-Midland dialect as well as the Saxon forms hence, hennis, henny, whence, whens, thence, thens, etc. The adverbs in bland, together, in lich, alike, in mid, amidst, in mange, amongst, are due, perhaps, to Scandinavian influence. 66. A. 6. Prepositions. 6. The preposition from never occurs in the following poems. It is replaced by fro, fra, Northumbrian, o and fra. 7. Conjunctions. 7. The conjunction if takes a negative form, as if equals if not unless. Description of the manuscript used in the present volume. 67. Description of the manuscript used in the present volume. 67. Cotton MS, Nero A. X. A small quarto volume, consisting of 3 different missives bound together, which originally had no connection with each other. Prefixed is an imperfect list of contents in the handwriting of James, the Bodley librarian. Cotton MS, Nero A. X. The first portion consists of a panegyrical oration in Latin by Justus de Justus, on John Chedworth, Archdeacon of Lincoln, dated at Verona July 16, 1468. It occupies 36 folios, written on vellum, and is the original copy presented by the author. The second portion is that we are more immediately concerned with. It is described by James as Vetus Poma Anglicanum, in quo sub insomniae figmento multa ad religionem et mores spectantia explicanter. And this account, with some slight changes, is adopted by Smith and Planta in their catalogues, both of whom assign it to the 15th century. It will appear, by what follows, that no less than 4 distinct poems have been confounded together by these writers. This portion of the volume extends from folios 37 to folios 126, inclusive, and is written by one and the same hand, in a small, sharp, irregular character, which is often, from the paleness of the ink and the contractions used, difficult to read. There are no titles or rubrics, but the divisions are marked by large initial letters of blue, flourished with red, and several illuminations, coarsely executed, serve by way of illustration, each of which occupies a page. 1. 4 of these are prefixed to the first poem. In the first, the author is represented slumbering in a meadow, by the side of a streamlet, clad in a long red gown, having falling sleeves, turned up with white, and a blue hood attached round the neck. In the second, the same person appears, drawn on a larger scale, and standing by the stream. In the third, he occurs nearly in the same position, with his hands raised, and on the opposite side a lady dressed in white, in the costume of Richard II's and Henry IV's time, buttoned tight up to the neck, with long hanging sleeves. Her hair is plaited on each side, and on her head is a crown. In the fourth, we see the author kneeling by the water, and beyond the stream is depicted a castle or palace, on the embattled wall of which appears the same lady, with her arm extended towards him. The poem commences on folios 39, and consists of 101 12-line stanzas, 68 every 5 of which conclude with the same line, and are connected by the iteration of a leading expression. It concludes on folios 55b. 68. 2. Then follow 2 more illuminations, in the first of which Noah and his family are represented in the ark, in the second the prophet Daniel expounding the writing on the wall to the affrighted Belshazzar and his queen. These serve as illustrations to the second poem, which begins at folios 57, and is written in long alliterative lines. It concludes on folios 82. 3. 2 illuminations precede, as before, one of which represents the sailors throwing the prophet Jonas into the sea, the other depicts the prophet in the attitude of preaching to the people of Nineveh. The poem is in the same meter as the last, and commences at folios 83. It is occupied wholly with the story of Jonas, as applicable to the praise of meekness and patience, and ends on folios 90. 4. The romance entitled Sir Gawain and the Green Kay and White Kay follows, folios 91. Prefixed is an illumination of a headless knight on horseback, carrying his head by its hair in his right hand, and looking benignly at an odd-eyed billman before him, while from a raised structure above, a king armed with a knife, his queen, an attendant with a saber, and another billman scowling looks on. Here and elsewhere the only colors used are green, red, blue, and yellow. It ends on folios 124b, and at the conclusion, in a later hand is written, Honi soit que malpenk, which may, perhaps, allude to the illumination on the opposite page, folios 125, representing the stolen interview between the wife of the Green Kay and White Kay and Sir Gawain. Above the lady's head is written, Me mind is mucalan on, a will me not amand. Some time was true as stan, and fro skame que here defend. It does not appear very clearly how these lines apply to the painting. 2 additional illuminations follow, in the first of which Gawain is seen approaching the Green Chapel, whilst his enemy appears above, wielding his huge axe, and in the second Sir Gawain, fully equipped in armor, is represented in the presence of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere, after his return to the court. The third and concluding portion of the cotton volume extends from folios 127 to folios 140b, inclusive, and consists of theological excerpts, in Latin, written in a hand of the end of the 13th century. At the conclusion is added Epitaphium de Ranulfo, Abate Remesiensi, who was abbot from the year 1231 to 1253, and who is erroneously called Ralph in the Monasticon, Volume 2. Page 548, New ed. Contractions used in the glossary. Contractions used in the glossary. The letters A, B, C refer severally to the poems entitled by me. The Pearl, Cleanness, and Patience. A.S. Anglo-Saxon. Dan. Danish. Du. Dutch. E. English. OE. Old English. PROVE. Provincial English. N.PROVE and P. North Provincial English. FR. French. O.FR. Old French. PROVFR. Provincial French. Fris. Frisian. G. Doug. Gawain Douglas's Aeneid, published by the Bannatyne Club, 2 volumes. Gawain Douglas's Aeneid, published by the Bannatyne Club, 2 volumes. Ger. German. Goth. Gothic. Isel. Icelandic. Jam. Jameson's Scottish Dictionary. Jameson's Scottish Dictionary. K. Alex. King Alexander, Romance of, edition Stevenson. King Alexander, Romance of, edition Stevenson. Met. Hom. Metrical Homilies, edition small. Metrical Homilies, edition small. ON. Old Norse. OS. Old Saxon. Prompt. Parv. Promptorium Parvulorum, edition Way. Promptorium Parvulorum, edition Way. SC. Scotch. O.SC. Old Scotch. S.Sax. Semi-Saxon. SW. Swedish. O.SW. Old Swedish. Town. Mist. Townley Mysteries. T.B. Troy Book, edition Donaldson. Troy Book, edition Donaldson. Collected Side Notes. Collected Side Notes. The Pearl, Side Notes. The Pearl, Side Notes. Description of a lost pearl, i.e., a beloved child. The father laments the loss of his pearl. He often visits the spot where his pearl disappeared, and hears a sweet song. Where the pearl was buried, there he found lovely flowers. Each blade of grass springs from a dead grain. In the high season of August, the parent visits the grave of his lost child. Beautiful flowers covered the grave. From them came a delicious odor. The bereaved father wrings his hands for sorrow, falls asleep upon the flowery plot, and dreams. In spirit he is carried to an unknown region, where the rocks and cliffs gleamed gloriously. The hillsides were decked with crystal cliffs. The leaves of the trees were like burnished silver. The gravel consisted of precious pearls. The father forgets his sorrow. He sees birds of the most beautiful hues, and hears their sweet melody. No tongue could describe the beauty of the forest. All shone like gold. The dreamer arrives at the bank of a river, which gave forth sweet sounds. In it, stones glittered like stars in the welkin on a winter night. His grief abates, and he follows the course of the stream. No one could describe his great joy. He thought that paradise was on the opposite bank. The stream was not fordable. More and more he desires to see what is beyond the brook. But the way seemed difficult. The dreamer finds new marvels. He sees a crystal cliff, at the foot of which sits a maiden clothed in glistening white. He knows that he has seen her before. He desires to call her but is afraid at finding her in such a strange place. So he stands still, like a well-trained hawk. He fears lest she should escape before he could speak to her. His long-lost one is dressed in royal array, decked with precious pearls. She comes along the stream towards him. Her kirtle is composed of soot, ornamented with pearls. She wore a crown of pearls. Her hair hung down about her. Her color was whiter than whalebone. Her hair shone as gold. The trimming of her robe consisted of precious pearls. A wonderful pearl was set in her breast. No man from here to Greece was so glad as the father, when he saw his pearl on the bank of the stream. The maiden salutes him. The father inquires of the maiden whether she is his long-lost pearl, and longs to know who has deprived him of his treasure. The maiden tells him that his pearl is not really lost. She is in a garden of delight, where sin and mourning are unknown. The rose that he had lost is become a pearl of price. The pearl blames his rash speech. The father begs the maiden to excuse his speech, for he really thought his pearl was wholly lost to him. The maiden tells her father that he has spoken 3 words without knowing the meaning of one. The first word. The second. The third. He is little to be praised who loves what he sees. To love nothing but what one sees is great presumption. To live in this kingdom, i.e. heaven, leave must be asked. This stream must be passed over by death. The father asks his pearl whether she is about to doom him to sorrow again. If he loses his pearl, he does not care what happens to him. The maiden tells her father to suffer patiently. Though he may dance as any doe, yet he must abide God's doom. He must cease to strive. All lies in God's power to make men joyful or sad. The father beseeches the pearl to have pity upon him. He says that she has been both his bale and bliss. And when he lost her, he knew not what had become of her. And now that he sees her in bliss, she takes little heed of his sorrow. He desires to know what life she leads. The maiden tells him that he may walk and abide with her, now that he is humble. All are meek that dwell in the abode of bliss. All lead a blissful life. She reminds her father that she was very young when she died. Now she is crowned a queen in heaven. The father of the maiden does not fully understand her. Mary, he says, is the queen of heaven. No one is able to remove the crown from her. The maiden addresses the Virgin. She then explains to her father that each has his place in heaven. The court of God has a property in its own being. Each one in it is a king or queen. The mother of Christ holds the chief place. We are all members of Christ's body. Look that each limb be perfect. The father replies that he cannot understand how his pearl can be a queen. He desires to know what greater honor she can have. She was only 2 years old when she died, and could do nothing to please God. She might be a countess or some great lady, but not a queen. The maiden informs her father that there is no limit to God's power. The parable of the laborers in the vineyard. The Lord of the vineyard hires workmen for a penny a day. At noon the Lord hires other men standing idle in the marketplace. He commands them to go into his vineyard, and he will give them what is right. At an hour before the sun went down the Lord sees other men standing idle. Tells them to go into the vineyard. As soon as the sun was gone down, the reeve was told to pay the workmen, to give each a penny. The first began to complain. Having borne the heat of the day, he thinks that he deserves more. The Lord tells him that he agreed only to give him a penny. The last shall be first, and the first last. The maiden applies the parable to herself. She came to the vine in eventide, and yet received more than others who had lived longer. The father says that his daughter's tale is unreasonable. In heaven, the maiden says, each man is paid alike. God is no niggard. The grace of God is sufficient for all. Those who live long on the earth often forfeit heaven by sinning. Innocents are saved by baptism. Why should not God allow their labor? Our first father lost heaven by eating an apple. And all are damned for the sin of Adam. But there came one who paid the penalty of our sins. The water that came from the pure side of Christ was baptism. Repentance must be sought by prayer with sorrow and affliction. The guilty may be saved by contrition. 2 sorts of people are saved, the righteous and the innocent. The words of David. The innocent is saved by right. The words of Solomon. David says no man living is justified. Pray to be saved by innocence and not by right. When Jesus was on earth, little children were brought unto him. The disciples rebuked the parents. Christ said, "Suffer little children to come unto me," etc. No one can win heaven except he be meek as a child. The pearl of price is like the kingdom of heaven, pure and clean. Forsake the mad world and purchase the spotless pearl. The father of the maiden desires to know who formed her figure and wrought her garments. Her beauty, he says, is not natural. Her color passes the fleur-de-lis. The maiden explains to her father that she is a bride of Christ. She is without spot or blemish. Her weeds are washed in the blood of Christ. The father asks the nature of the Lamb that has chosen his daughter, and why she is selected as a bride. The Lamb has 140,000 brides. St. John saw them on the hill of Shaun in a dream, in the new city of Jerusalem. Isaiah speaks of Christ or the Lamb. He says that he was led as a lamb to the slaughter. In Jerusalem was Christ slain. With buffets was his face flayed. He endured all patiently as a lamb. For us he died in Jerusalem. The declaration of St. John. Behold the Lamb of God, etc. Who can reckon his generation, that died in Jerusalem? In the New Jerusalem St. John saw the Lamb sitting upon the throne. The Lamb is without blemish. Every spotless soul is a worthy bride for the Lamb. No strife or envy among the brides. None can have less bliss than another. Our death leads us to bliss. What St. John saw upon the Mount of Shaun. About the Lamb he saw 140,000 maidens. He heard a voice from heaven, like many floods. He heard the maidens sing a new song. So did the four beasts and the elders. So sad of cheer. This assembly was like the Lamb, spotless and pure. The Father replies to the maiden. He says he is but dust and ashes. He wishes to ask one question, whether the brides have their abode in castle walls or in manor. Jerusalem, he says, in Judea. But the dwelling of the brides should be perfect. For such a comely pack, a great castle would be required. The city in Judea, answers the maiden, is where Christ suffered, and is the old Jerusalem. The new Jerusalem is where the Lamb has assembled his brides. Jerusalem means the city of God. In the old city our peace was made at one. In the new city is eternal peace. The Father prays his daughter to bring him to the blissful bower. His daughter tells him that he shall see the outside, but not a foot may he put in the city. The maiden then tells her father to go along the bank till he comes to a hill. He reaches the hill, and beholds the heavenly city. As St. John saw it, so he beheld it. The city was of burnished gold, pitched upon gems, the foundation composed of 12 stones. The names of the precious stones: I. Jasper. 2. Sapphire. 3. Chalcedony. 4. Emerald. V. Sardonyx. 6. Ruby. 7. Chrysolite. 8. Beryl. 9. Topaz. X. Chrysoprasus. 11. Jacinth. 12. Amethyst. The city was square. The wall was of jasper. 12,000 furlongs in length and breadth. Each pane had 3 gates. Each gate adorned with a pearl. Such light gleamed in all the streets, that there was no need of the sun or moon. God was the light of those in the city. The high throne might be seen, upon which the high God sat. A river ran out of the throne, it flowed through each street. No church was seen. God was the church, Christ the sacrifice. The gates were ever open. There is no night in the city. The planets and the sun itself are dim compared to the divine light. Trees there renew their fruit every month. The beholder of this fair city stood still as a dazed quail. As the moon began to rise, he was aware of a procession of virgins crowned with pearls, in white robes, with a pearl in their breast. As they went along, they shone as glass. The Lamb went before them. There was no pressing. The aldermen fell groveling at the feet of the Lamb. All sang in praise of the Lamb. The Lamb wore white weeds. A wide wound was seen near his breast. Joy was in his looks. The Father perceives his little queen. Great delight takes possession of his mind. He attempts to cross the stream. It was not pleasing to the Lord. The dreamer awakes, and is in great sorrow. He addresses his pearl, laments his rash curiosity. Men desire more than they have any right to expect. The good Christian knows how to make peace with God. God give us grace to be his servants. Cleanness, side notes. Cleanness, side notes. Cleanness discloses fair forms. God is angry with the unclean worshipper, and with false priests. The pure worshipper receives great reward. The impure will bring upon them the anger of God, who is pure and holy. It would be a marvel if God did not hate evil. Christ showed us that himself. St. Matthew records the discourse. The clean of heart shall look on our Lord. What earthly noble, when seated at table above dukes, would like to see a lad badly attired approach the table with rent cockers, his coat torn and his toes out? For any one of these he would be turned out with a big buffet, and be forbidden to re-enter, and thus be ruined through his vile clothes. The parable of the marriage of the king's son. The king's invitation. Those invited begin to make excuses. One had bought an estate and must go to see it. Another had purchased some oxen and wished to see them pull in the plough. A third had married a wife and could not come. The Lord was greatly displeased, and commanded his servants to invite the wayfaring, both men and women, the better and the worse, that his palace might be full. The servants brought in bachelors and squires. When they came to the court, they were well entertained. The servants tell their lord that they have done his behest, and there is still room for more guests. The Lord commands them to go out into the fields, and bring in the halt, blind, and one-eyed. For those who denied shall not taste one sup, to save them from death. The palace soon became full of people of all plights. They were not all one wife's sons, nor had they all one father. The brightest attired had the best place. Below sat those with poor weeds. All are well entertained with meat and minstrelsy. Each with his mate made him at ease. The lord of the feast goes among his guests, bids them be merry. On the floor he finds one not arrayed for a holy day. Asks him how he obtained entrance, and how he was so bold as to appear in such rags. Does he take him to be a harlot? The man becomes discomfited. He is unable to reply. The Lord commands him to be bound, and cast into a deep dungeon. This feast is likened to the kingdom of heaven, to which all are invited. See that thy weeds are clean. Thy weeds are thy works that thou hast wrought. For many faults may a man forfeit bliss. For sloth and pride he is thrust into the devil's throat. He is ruined by covetousness, perjury, murder, theft, and strife. For robbery and ribaldry, for preventing marriages, and supporting the wicked, for treason, treachery, and tyranny, man may lose eternal bliss. The high prince of all is displeased with those who work wickedly. For the first fault the devil committed, he felt God's vengeance. He, the fairest of all angels, forsook his sovereign, and boasted that his throne should be as high as God's. For these words he was cast down to hell. The fiends fell from heaven, like the thick snow, for 40 days. From heaven to hell the shower lasted. The devil would not make peace with God. Affliction makes him none the better. For the fault of one, vengeance alighted upon all men. Adam was ordained to live in bliss. Through Eve he ate an apple. Thus all his descendants became poisoned. A maiden brought a remedy for mankind. Malice was merciless. A race of men came into the world, the fairest, the merriest, and the strongest that ever were created. They were sons of Adam. No law was laid upon them. Nevertheless they acted unnaturally. The fiends beheld how fair were the daughters of these mighty men, and made fellowship with them and begot a race of giants. The greatest fighter was reckoned the most famous. The Creator of all becomes exceedingly wroth. Fell anger touches his heart. It repents him that he has made man. He declares that all flesh shall be destroyed, both man and beast. There was at this time living on the earth a very righteous man. Noah was his name. 3 bold sons he had. God in great anger speaks to Noah. Declares that he will destroy all that life has. Commands him to make a mansion, with dwellings for wild and tame. To let the ark be 300 cubits in length, and 50 in breadth, and 30 in height, and a window in it a cubit square. Also a good shutting door in the side, together with halls, recesses, bushes, and bowers, and well-formed pens. For all flesh shall be destroyed, except Noah and his family. Noah is told to take into the ark 7 pairs of every clean beast, and 1 of unclean kind, and to furnish the ark with proper food. Noah fills the ark. God asks Noah whether all is ready. Noah replies that all is fully prepared. He is commanded to enter the ark, for God tells him that he will send a rain to destroy all flesh. Noah stows all safely in the ark. 7 days are passed. The deep begins to swell, Banks are broken down, and the clouds burst. It rains for 40 days, and the flood rises, and flows over the woods and fields. All must drown. The water enters the houses. Each woman with her bairns flees to the hills. The rain never ceases. The valleys are filled. People flock to the mountains. Some swim for their lives. Others roar for fear. Animals of all kinds run to the hills. All pray for mercy. God's mercy is passed from them. Each sees that he must sink. Friends take leave of one another. 40 days have gone by, and all are destroyed. All rot in the mud, except Noah and his family, who are safe in the ark. The ark is lifted as high as the clouds, and is driven about, without mast, bowline, cables, anchors, or sail to guide its course. At the mercy of the winds. Oft it rolled around and reared on end. The age of the patriarch Noah. Duration of the flood. The completeness of the destruction. God remembers those in the ark. He causes a wind to blow, and closes the lakes and wells, and the great deep. The ark settles on Mount Ararat. Noah beholds the bare earth. He opens his window, and sends out the raven to seek dry land. The raven croaks for comfort. On finding carrion, he fills his belly with the foul flesh. The Lord of the ark curses the raven, and sends out the dove. The bird wanders about the whole day. Finding no rest, she returns about eventide to Noah. Noah again sends out the dove. The dove returns with an olive branch in her beak. This was a token of peace and reconciliation. Joy reigns in the ark. The people therein laugh and look thereout. God permits Noah and his sons to leave the ark. Noah offers sacrifice to God. It is pleasing to him that all speeds are spoils. God declares that he will never destroy the world for the sin of man. That summer and winter shall never cease. Nor night nor day, nor the New Year's. God blesses every beast. Each fowl takes its flight. Each fish goes to the flood. Each beast makes for the plain. Wild worms wriggle to their abodes in the earth. The fox goes to the woods. Harts to the heath, and hares to the gorse. Lions and leopards go to the lakes. Eagles and hawks to the high rocks. The four freaks take the empire. Behold what woe God brought on mankind for their hateful deeds. Beware of the filth of the flesh. The barrel is clean and sound, it has no seam. When God repented that he had made man, he destroyed all flesh. But afterwards he was sorry, and made a covenant with mankind that he would not again destroy all the living. For the filth of the flesh God destroyed a rich city. God hates the wicked as hell that stinks. Especially harlotry and blasphemy. Nothing is hidden from God. God is the ground of all deeds. He honors the man that is honest and whole. But for deeds of shame he destroys the mighty ones. Abraham is sitting before his house door under a green oak. He sees 3 men coming along, and goes toward them. He entreats them to rest a while, that he may wash their feet, and bring them a morsel of bread. Abraham commands Sarah to make some cakes quickly, and tells his servant to see the tender kid. Abraham appears bareheaded before his guests. He casts a clean cloth on the green, and sets before them cakes, butter, milk, and pottage. God praises his friend's feast, and after the meat is removed, he tells Abraham that Sarah shall bear him a son. Sarah, who is behind the door, laughs in unbelief. God tells Abraham that Sarah laughs at his words. Sarah denies that she laughed. Abraham's guests set out toward Sodom, 2 miles from Mamre. The patriarch accompanies them. God determines to reveal to Abraham his secret purposes. He informs him of the destruction about to fall upon the cities of the plain, for their great wickedness, in abusing the gifts bestowed upon them. The ordinance of marriage had been made for them, but they foully set it at naught. The flame of love. Therefore shall they be destroyed as an example to all men forever. Abraham is full of fear, and asks God whether the sinful and the sinless are to suffer together. Whether he will spare the cities provided 50 righteous are found in them? For the sake of 50 the cities shall be spared. The patriarch beseeches God to spare the city for the sake of 45 righteous. For the lack of 5 the cities shall not be destroyed. For 40 the cities shall be spared. Abraham entreats God's forbearance for his speech. 30 righteous, found in the cities, shall save them from destruction. For the sake of 20 guiltless ones God will release the rest. Or if 10 only should be found pure. The patriarch intercedes for Lot. Beseeches him to temper his ire, and then departs weeping for sorrow. God's messengers go to Sodom. Lot is sitting alone at the door of his lodge. Staring into the street, he sees 2 men. Beardless chins they had, and hair like raw silk. Beautifully white were their weeds. Lot runs to meet them. Invites them to remain a while in his house, and in the morning they may take their way. Lot invites them so long that at last they comply. The wife and daughters of Lot welcome their visitors. Lot admonishes his men to prepare the meat, and to serve no salt with it. Lot's wife disregards the injunction. The guests are well entertained. But before they go to rest, the city is up in arms. With keen clubs, the folk clatter on the walls, and demand that Lot should deliver up his guests. The wind yet stinks with their filthy speech. Lot is in great trouble. He leaves his guests and addresses the Sodomites. He offers to give up to them his 2 daughters. The rebels raise a great noise, and ask who made him a justice to judge their deeds, who was but a boy when he came to Sodom. The young men bring Lot within doors, and smite those outside with blindness. In vain they try to find the door of Lot's house. Early in the morning the angels command Lot to depart from Sodom, with his wife and 2 daughters, and to look straight before him, for Sodom and Gomorrah shall be destroyed. Lot asks what is best to be done, that he may escape. He is told to choose himself a dwelling which shall be saved from destruction. He chooses Zoar. The angels command Lot to depart quickly. He wakes his wife and daughters. All 4 are hastened on by the angels, who preach to them the peril of delay. Before daylight Lot comes to a hill. God aloft raises a storm. A rain falls thick of fire and sulfur. Upon the 4 cities it comes, and frightens all folks therein. The great bars of the abyss do burst. Cliffs cleave asunder. The cities sink to hell. Such a cry arises that the clouds clatter again. Lot and his companions are frightened, but continue to follow their face. Lot's wife looks behind her, and is turned to a stiff stone, as salt as any sea. Her companions do not miss her till they reach Zoar. By this time all were drowned. The people of Zoar, for dread, rush into the sea and are destroyed. Only Zoar with 3 therein, Lot and his daughters, are saved. Lot's wife is an image of salt for 2 faults. 1. She served salt before the Lord at supper. 2. She looked behind her. Abraham is up full early on the morn. He looks toward Sodom, now only a pit filled with pitch, from which rise smoke, ashes and cinders, as from a furnace. A sea now occupies the place of the 4 cities. It is a stinking pool, and is called the Dead Sea. Nothing may live in it. Lead floats on its surface. A feather sinks to the bottom of it. Lands watered by this sea never bear grass or weed. A man cannot be drowned in it. The clay clinging to it is corrosive, as alum, alkarin, sulfur, etc., which fret the flesh and fester the bones. On the shores of this lake grow trees bearing fair fruits, which, when broken or bitten, taste like ashes. All these are tokens of wickedness and vengeance. God loves the pure in heart. Strive to be clean. Jean de Meun tells how a lady is to be loved. By doing what pleases her best. Love thy Lord. Conform to Christ, who is polished as a pearl. By how comely a contrivance did he enter the womb of the Virgin? In what purity did he part from her? No abode was better than his. The sorrow of childbirth was turned to joy. Angels solaced the Virgin with organs and pipes. The child Christ was so clean that ox and ass worshipped him. He hated wickedness, and would never touch aught that was vile. Yet there came to him Lazars and lepers, lame and blind, dry and dropsical folk. He healed all with kind speech. His handling was so good that he needed no knife to cut or carve with. The bread he broke more perfectly than could all the tools of Toulouse. How can we approach his court except we be clean? God is merciful. Through penance we may shine as a pearl. Why is the pearl so prized? she becomes none the worse for wear. If she should become dim, wash her in wine. She then becomes clearer than before. So may the sinner polish him by penance. Beware of returning to sin, for then God is more displeased than ever. The reconciled soul God holds as his own. Ill deeds rob him of it. God forbids us to defile any vessels used in his service. In Belshazzar's time, the defiling of God's vessels brought wrath upon the king. Daniel in his prophecies tells of the destruction of the Jews. For their unfaithfulness in following other gods, God allowed the heathen to destroy them, in the reign of Zedekiah, who practiced idolatry. Nebuchadnezzar becomes his foe. He besieges Jerusalem, and surrounds the walls. The city is stuffed full of men. Brisk is the skirmish. 7 times a day are the gates assailed. For 2 years the fight goes on, yet the city is not taken. The folk within are in want of food. Meager they become. For so shut up are they that escape seems impossible. But on a quiet night they steal out, and rush through the host. They are discovered by the enemy. A loud alarm is given. They are pursued and overtaken. Their king is made prisoner. His chief men are presented as prisoners to Nebuchadnezzar. His sons are slain. His own eyes are put out. He is placed in a dungeon in Babylon. All for his bad bearing against the Lord, who might otherwise have been his friend. Nebuchadnezzar ceased not until he had destroyed Jerusalem. Nebuzaradan was chief of the chivalry. The best men were taken out of the city. Nevertheless, Nebuzaradan spared not those left. Brains of barons were spilt. Priests pressed to death. Wives and wenches foully killed. All that escaped the sword were taken to Babylon, and were made to drag the cart or milk the kine. Nebuzaradan burst open the temple, and slew those therein. Priests, pulled by the pole, were slain along with deacons, clerks, and maidens. The enemy pillages the temple of its pillars of brass, and the golden candlestick from off the altar. Goblets, basins, golden dishes, all are taken by Nebuzaradan, and hampered together. Solomon had made them with much labor. The temple he beats down, and returns to Babylon. Presents the prisoners to the king, among whom were Daniel and his 3 companions. Nebuchadnezzar has great joy, because his enemies are slain. Great was his wonder when he saw the sacred jewelry. He praises the God of Israel. Such vessels never before came to Chaldea. They are thrust into the treasury. Nebuchadnezzar reigns as emperor of all the earth, through the doom of Daniel, who gave him good counsel. Nebuchadnezzar dies and is buried. Belshazzar succeeds him. He holds himself the biggest in heaven or on earth. He honors not God, but worships false phantoms. He promises them rewards if good fortune befall. If they vex him, he knocks them in pieces. He has a wife, and many concubines. The mind of the king was fixed upon new meats, and other vain things. Belshazzar, to exhibit his vainglory, proclaims throughout Babylon that all the great ones should assemble on a set day, at the Sultan's feast. Kings, dukes, and lords were commanded to attend the court. To do the king honor, many nobles came to Babylon. It would take too long to name the number. The city of Babylon is broad and big. It is situated on a plain, surrounded by 7 streams, a high wall, and towers. The palace was long and large, each side being 7 miles in length. High houses were within the walls. The time of the feast has come. Belshazzar sits upon his throne. The hall floor is covered with knights. When all are seated, service begins. Trumpets sound everywhere. Bread is served upon silver dishes. All sorts of musical instruments are heard in the hall. The king, surrounded by his loves, drinks copiously of wine. It gets into his head and stupefies him. A cursed thought takes possession of him. He commands his marshal to bring him the vessels taken from the temple by Nebuchadnezzar, and to fill them with wine. The marshal opens the chests, covers the cupboard with vessels. The jewels of Jerusalem deck the sides of the hall. The altar and crown, blessed by bishops' hands, and anointed with the blood of beasts, are set before the bold Belshazzar. Upon this altar were noble vessels curiously carved, basins of gold, cups arrayed like castles with battlements, and towers with lofty pinnacles. Upon them were portrayed branches and leaves, the flowers of which were white pearls, and the fruit flaming gems. The goblets were ornamented with flowers of gold. The candlestick was brought in, with its pillars of brass, and ornamental boughs, upon which sat birds of various hues. Lights shone bright from the candlestick, which once stood before the Holy of Holies. The pollution of the sacred vessels is displeasing to God. 4. A boaster on bench drinks from them till he is as drunken as the devil. God is very angry. Before harming the revelers, he sends them a warning. Belshazzar commands the sacred vessels to be filled with wine. The cups and bowls are soon filled. Music of all kind is heard in the hall. Dukes, princes, concubines, and knights, all are merry. Drinking of the sweet liquors, they ask favors of their gods, who, although dumb, are as highly praised as if heaven were theirs. A marvel befalls the feasters. The king first saw it. Upon the plain wall, a palm with pointel and fingers, is seen writing. The bold Belshazzar becomes frightened. His knees knock together. He roars for dread, still beholding the hand, as it wrote on the rough wall. The hand vanishes, but the letters remain. The king recovers his speech and sends for the book learned, but none of the scholars were wise enough to read it. Belshazzar is nearly mad. Commands the city to be searched throughout for the wise of witchcraft. He who expounds the strange letters shall be clothed in gowns of purple. A collar of gold shall encircle his throat. He shall be the third lord in the realm. As soon as this cry was upcast, to the hall came clerks out of Chaldea, witches and diviners, sorcerers and exorcists. But after looking on the letters, they were as ignorant as if they had looked into the leather of the left boot. The king curses them all and calls them churls. He orders the harlots to be hanged. The queen hears the king chide. She inquires the cause. Goes to the king, kneels before him, and asks why he has rent his robes for grief, when there is one that has the Spirit of God, the counselor of Nebuchadnezzar, the interpreter of his dreams, through the Holy Spirit of God. The name of this man is Daniel, who was brought a captive from Judea. The queen tells the king to send for Daniel. Her counsel is accepted. Daniel comes before Belshazzar. The king tells him that he has heard of his wisdom, and his power to discover hidden things, and that he wants to know the meaning of the writing on the wall. Promises him, if he can explain the text of the letters and their interpretation, to clothe him in purple and pall, and put a ring about his neck, and to make him a baron upon bench. Daniel addresses the king, and reminds him how that God supported his father, and gave him power to exalt or abase whomsoever he pleased. Nebuchadnezzar was established on account of his faith in God. So long as he remained true, no man was greater. But at last pride touches his heart. He forgets the power of God, and blasphemes his name. He says that he is God of the ground, and the builder of Babylon. Hardly had Nebuchadnezzar spoken, when God's voice is heard, saying, Thy principality is departed. Thou, removed from men, must abide on the moor, and walk with wild beasts, eat herbs, and dwell with wolves and asses. For his pride he becomes an outcast. He believes himself to be a bull or an ox. Goes on all fours, like a cow, for 7 summers. His thighs grew thick. His hair became matted and thick, from the shoulders to the toes. His beard touched the earth. His brows were like briars. His eyes were hollow, and gray as the kites. Eagle-hued he was. At last he recovered his wit, and believed in God. Then soon was he restored to his seat. But thou, Belshazzar, hast disregarded these signs, and hast blasphemed the Lord, defiled his vessels, filling them with wine for thy wenches, and praising thy lifeless gods. For this sin God has sent thee this strange sight, the fist with the fingers writing on the wall. These are the words: Mean Tekel Perez. Mean dot, God has counted thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel dot, thy reign is weighed and is found wanting in deeds of faith. Perez dot, thy kingdom is divided, and given to the Persians. The Medes shall be masters here. The king commands Daniel to be clothed in a frock of fine cloth. Soon is he arrayed in purple, with a chain about his neck. A decree is made, that all should bow to him, as the third lord that followed Belshazzar. The decree was made known, and all were glad. The day, however, passed. Night came on. Before another day dawned, Daniel's words were fulfilled. The feast lasts till the sun falls. The skies become dark. Each noble hies home to his supper. Belshazzar is carried to bed, but never rises from it, for his foes are seeking to destroy his land, and are assembled suddenly. The enemy is Darius, leader of the Medes. He has legions of armed men. Under cover of the darkness, they cross the river. By means of ladders they get upon the walls, and within an hour enter the city, without disturbing any of the watch. They run into the palace, and raise a great cry. Men are slain in their beds. Belshazzar is beaten to death, and caught by the heels, is foully cast into a ditch. Darius is crowned king, and makes peace with the barons. Thus the land was lost for the king's sin. He was cursed for his uncleanness, and deprived of his honor, as well as of the joys of heaven. Thus in 3 ways has it been shown that uncleanness makes God angry. Cleanness is his comfort. The seemly shall see his face. God give us grace to serve in his sight. Patience, side notes. Patience, side notes. Patience is often displeasing, but it assuages heavy hearts, and quenches malice. Happiness follows sorrow. It is better to suffer than to be angry. Matthew tells us of the promises made by Christ. Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the meek, for they shall wield the world. Blessed are the mourners, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the hungry, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for mercy shall be their reward. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they shall see the Savior. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called God's sons. Blessed are they that live aright, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. These blessings are promised to those who follow poverty, pity, penance, meekness, mercy, chastity, peace, and patience. Poverty and patience are to be treated together. They are fettled in one form, and have one meed. Poverty will dwell where she lists, and man must needs suffer. Poverty and patience are playfellows. What avails impatience, if God send affliction? Patience is best. Did not Jonah incur danger by his folly? Jonah was a prophet of the Gentiles. God's word came to him, saying, Rise quickly, take the way to Nineveh. Say that which I shall put in thine heart. Wickedness dwells in that city. Go swiftly and carry my message. Jonah is full of wrath. He is afraid that the shrews will put him in the stocks, or put out his eyes. He thinks that God desires his death. He determines not to go near the city, but fly to Tarshish. Grumbling, he goes to Port Joppa. He says that God will not be able to protect him. Jonah reaches the port, finds a ship ready to sail. The seamen catch up the cross sail, fasten the cables, weigh their anchors, and spread sail. A gentle wind wafts the ship along. Was never a Jew so joyful as was Jonah then. He has, however, put himself in peril, in fleeing from God. The words of David. Does he not hear, who made all ears? He is not blind that formed each eye. Jonah is now in no dread. He is, however, soon overtaken. The wielder of all things has devices at will. He commands Eurus and Aquilo to blow. The winds blow obedient to his word. Out of the northeast the noise begins. Storms arose, winds wrestled together, the waves rolled high, and never rested. Then was Jonah joyless. The boat reeled around. The gear became out of order. Ropes and mast were broken. A loud cry is raised, many a lad labors to lighten the ship. They throw overboard their bags and feather beds. But still the wind rages, and the waves become wilder. Each man calls upon his god. Some called upon Vernagu, Diana, and Neptune, to the sun and to the moon. Then said one of the sailors, Some lawless wretch, that has grieved his god, is in the ship. I advise that we lay lots upon each man. When the guilty is gone the tempest may cease. This is agreed to. All are assembled, from all corners of the ship, save Jonah the Jew, who had fled into the bottom of the boat. There he falls asleep. Soon he is aroused, and brought on board. Full roughly is he questioned. The lot falls upon Jonah. Then quickly they said, "What the devil hast thou done, doted wretch? What seekest thou on the sea? Hast thou no God to call upon? Of what land art thou? Thou art doomed for thy ill deeds." Jonah says, "I am a Hebrew, a worshipper of the world's Creator. All this mischief is caused by me, therefore cast me overboard." He proves to them that he was guilty. The mariners are exceedingly frightened. They try to make way with their oars, but their endeavors are useless. Jonah must be doomed to death. They pray to God that they may not shed innocent blood. Jonah is cast overboard. The tempest ceases and the sea settles. The stiff streams drive the ship about. At last they reach a bank. The seamen thank God and perform solemn vows. Jonah is in great dread. Jonah is shoved from the ship. A wild whale swims by the boat. He opens his swallow and seizes the prophet. It is not to be wondered at that Jonah suffered woe. The prophet is without hope. Cold was his comfort. Jonah was only a mote in the whale's jaws. He entered in by the gills, and by means of one of the intestines of the fish, came into a space as large as a hall. The prophet fixes his feet firmly in the belly of the whale. He searches into every nook of its navel. The prophet calls upon God. He cries for mercy. He sits safely in a recess, in a bowel of the beast, for 3 days and 3 nights. The whale passes through many a rough region. Jonah makes the whale feel sick. The prophet prays to God in this wise: "Lord, to thee have I cried out of hell's womb. Thou dippedst me in the sea. Thy great floods passed over me. The streams drive over me. I am cast out from thy sight. The abyss binds me. The rushing waves play on my head. Thou possessest my life. In my anguish I remembered my God, and besought his pity. When I am delivered from this danger, I will obey thy commands." God speaks fiercely to the whale, and he vomits out the prophet on a dry space. Jonah has need to wash his clothes. God's word comes to the prophet. He is told to preach in Nineveh. By night Jonah reaches the city. Nineveh was a very great city. Jonah delivers his message. "Yet 40 days and Nineveh shall come to an end. It shall be turned upside down, and swallowed quickly by the black earth." This speech spreads throughout the city. Great fear seizes all. The people mourn secretly, clothe themselves in sackcloth, and cast ashes upon their heads. The message reaches the ears of the king. He rends his robes, clothes himself in sackcloth, and mourns in the dust. He issues a decree that all in the city, men, beasts, women and children, prince, priest, and prelates, should fast for their sins. Children are to be weaned from the breast. The ox is to have no hay, nor the horse any water. Who can tell if God will have mercy? Though he is mighty, he is merciful, and may forgive us our guilt. All believed and repented. God forgave them through his goodness. Much sorrow settles upon Jonah. He becomes very angry. He prays to God and says, "Was not this my saying, when thy message reached me in my own country? I knew thy great goodness, thy long-suffering, and thy mercy. I knew these men might make their peace with thee, therefore I fled unto Tarshish. Take my life from me, O Lord! It is better for me to die than live." God upbraids Jonah, saying, "Is this right to be so wroth?" Jonah, jangling, uprises, and makes himself a bower, of hay and everfern, to shield him from the sun. He slept heavily all night. God prepared a woodbine. Jonah awakes, and is exceedingly glad of the bower. The prophet, under its gracious leaves, is protected from the sun's rays. Jonah wishes he had such a lodge in his own country. God prepared a worm that made the woodbine wither. Jonah awakes and finds his woodbine destroyed. The leaves were all faded. The sun beat upon the head of Jonah. He is exceedingly angry, and prays God that he may die. God rebukes the prophet. Jonah replies, "I would I were dead." God asks if it is to be wondered at that he should help his handiwork. Is not Jonah angry that his woodbine is destroyed, which cost him no labor? God is not to be blamed for taking pity upon people that he made. Should he destroy Nineveh, the sorrow of such a sweet place would sink to his heart. In the city there are little bairns who have done no wrong, and there are others who cannot discern between their right hand and their left hand. There are also dumb beasts in the city incapable of sinning. Judgment must be tempered with mercy. He that is too hasty to rend his clothes must afterwards sit with worse ones to sew them together. Poverty and pain must be endured. Patience is a noble point, though it displeases oft. Text and layout. Text and layout. The text is intended to replicate the layout of the printed book as closely as possible. Headnotes, printed at the top of each page, have been moved to the most appropriate sentence break. Some shorter headnote pairs may be merged into one. Side notes giving plot summary are placed close to their original location. The notes were originally printed as a short, 12 pages, section before the glossarial index. For this e-text they have been distributed among their respective texts. Links to the notes are intended to be visible but not distracting. Text-critical notes, such as variant readings, have been handled differently than in the printed book, where they appeared either as footnotes, numbered, or side notes, sometimes but not always marked. Here, the word they refer to is underlined if necessary, and the note itself will generally have this form. Underlined. Leek, the T of the MS, has a K over it. Where a single word has both an endnote and a marginal note, the link to the endnote is shown. A. An unusual typographical error, shown with beginnings of adjoining lines. A. Back to top. Preface. Side notes.